I'm here again today with Alex, who, as you might recall, is a geologist and has some very interesting ideas about the outer and inner layers of the Earth and how that relates to everything else in the world. And last time Alex and I got together, we talked about portals and how portals seem to open up when we come to the limit of our knowledge, when we fall into error or fall into catastrophe of some kind. We seem to come upon a portal that is offering us new knowledge or wisdom. And we had decided that we would make our first episode about portals, our second episode about encounters, and our third episode about language. Now, it's very difficult to disentangle all of these and not lump it all together in one conversation, but we're doing our best so that we can save some of the goodies about language until the next episode. But today, Alex and I are talking about encounters. And since it was his original suggestion that we talk about encounters, I'm going to let Alex get us started. And then I'll jump in when I think I might have something to add. How does that sound, Alex?
That's okay. I'll try.
Okay, good.
Yeah, encounter is such a broad word, and the immediate thing that comes to my mind is encounter with what. Um, so encounter is kind of like a generic word in a sense until you frame it. And I think that the frame that I'm interested in, and that maybe we're interested in pursuing, is the encounter with the transcendent, and and what that is. And I think you played the video of Jordan Peterson talking last time, where he's talking about and bumping up against the transcendent, as if it was something that corrects you, that you think you thought you knew who you were talking to, and then they say something and it turns out that's not who you thought you were talking to, or vice versa, um, or any kind of situation like that where you're surprised, or and in a way that is um, informing you of something like that's more real, or uh, I don't want to say accurate, but relevant maybe, uh, more relevantly real than um, the way you had framed or modeled or thought of reality prior to that encounter. So I guess that's kind of the frame that I was looking at, and I'll just sort of take this into the next sort of phase of it. I was thinking about how um, Michael Levin's work and others that are working on this sort of multi-scalar or multi-layers of goal-directed agents and agency, and how there is like this encounter with say within a layer, there's an encounter, but then somehow I got the sense that we're trying to talk about the encounter in the vertical sense, when you encounter the sort of the upper boundary of
Mhm.
not even any individual's particular knowledge, or the any individual's field of possible knowledge that they can possess as an individual, but something like a next higher level of, and I'm not even necessarily talking about, the ultimate
Mhm.
transcendent layer, but just the next highest level of
Mhm.
uh, pattern pattern dynamics or something like that. That
How the next level up seems to have some agency over the level below, or
exactly.
seems to have some authority. I don't know, some sort of a rule or something
Yeah,
over the level below.
right, right.
It reminds me of the way Glenn used to talk about the inside and the outside, and how if everything is nested the way that Jordan Peterson always talks about it, the very lowest level is nested inside the next level is nested inside the next level and all the way up. Then when you get to the upper bound of a level, you're actually bumping up against the upper bound of the inside and the lower bound of the outside. And so he used to use an example of a watch and how a watch has a very, very complex inside with all the gears and levers and all that kind of stuff. But for the
Mhm.
next level up, it's a
Mhm.
very simple process to just turn the watch on or off, or turn the little, what is that thing?
Yeah.
I don't remember anymore what it's called. We don't use that kind of watch anymore because we
Right,
have
right.
we have the digital watches, the
Yeah.
stem, turning the stem, right?
Yeah, right.
And so it at the next level up, there is some authority over the level below,
Mm.
even though the level below might be incredibly complex. The next level up has this
Yeah,
simpler authority over it, and and that kind of scalar agency goes all the way up.
right, right. So not just scalar, but nested
Yeah,
in some
that's
sort
yeah.
of sense that there's a continuity across the boundaries. There's a
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I was thinking of that in terms of sort of like if you pretend or do the thought experiment, like say we're cells
Mm-hmm.
in a and I think the sort of the one-to-one leap would be we're in a body or we're in a tissue or organ or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're operating under sort of what we perceive as the constraints that we perceive, and there whatever level of complexity is involved there. But um, if you imagine that there's another layer or layers of you could call it abstraction or knobs or handles or something like that where something can change in that realm that affects this realm. Um, I was thinking about how maybe a more appropriate metaphor or analogy would be um, bacterium in a pond, single-celled organisms, because they're not necessarily, say, part of a organ or a or tissue or something. They have more independence,
Mm-hmm.
and they operate under this sort of mode of uh, glucose gradient, and they have sort of a binary mode of swimming. They have little propellers all around them.
Mm-hmm.
Are you familiar with this?
The bacterial flagellum.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
flagellum, and they have sort of like two different possibilities that they can spin their propellers in one way and they'll go forward, and that's running, or they can spin in all different directions, so they'll have a chaotic, they call it tumbling, sort of like a run and tumbling behavior, and it's all dependent upon their ability to detect a gradient of glucose or a concentration of glucose, and it's either above that threshold or below it. And all they're doing is they don't know which direction they're going, like north, south, east, west, or they don't even have like a magnetic, I don't think they even have like a magnetic compass or something, function
Mm-hmm.
like some birds do. Um, but they just know if the gradient is above a certain level of glucose, they just go forward, or all their propellers turn so that they're propelled in a running. And if it drops below that, their propellers start working randomly and they go in a random pattern. So that's like to me, that's more like our individual, because we're not like all holding hands constantly with each other, you know. And but the people that study the groups or the group behavior dynamics of these bacteria discovered that they actually do have some sort of a intercellular communication that it carries a signal of what the entire colony or group is experiencing. And they call it traveling band phenomena. And so there'll be like groups of bacteria that will band together and travel. So they know something beyond what they can detect locally in the gradient. Only the group can detect like this group a combination of all the individuals having their own sovereign experience of the glucose gradient
Mm-hmm.
produces this higher order sort of a signal or wave that goes through the entire colony, and they can detect that wave plus their own sovereign glucose gradient detection. And at some point that will like some of them will choose to go with the group signal and they'll all go together. So I think anyway, that's what I was thinking about in terms of
Well, that's really
different
cool.
ways.
I mean, I want you to hold that thought, and we'll keep going from there. But I had a
Yeah,
couple thoughts that popped up. One is
sure.
that when you talk about the gradient being below a certain threshold, when the gradient is above a certain threshold, it moves forward. It reminds me of the left hemisphere of the brain. It targeted on a certain object, and it's going to move towards that object, right?
Yeah.
But when the gradient falls below a certain threshold, the propellers become more stochastic, which is really more like exploratory. It's
Yeah.
accidentally exploratory, but it is
Yeah.
exploratory because if it's random, stochastic, it's just going to move all over until it finds another gradient that's moved straight ahead. So it's like the left
Exactly.
hemisphere and the right hemisphere of the brain functioning together,
Huh. Yeah, yeah, I see what
right?
you mean.
To
Right,
and
right,
and
yeah.
then there's probably something related to that is connected to the traveling band phenomenon, because then that
Yeah.
traveling band phenomenon is like another level up, because what you have there is something very analogous to distributed cognition as it relates to economics, like the invisible hand,
Right, right,
right?
yeah. Yes, yes.
So that those were a couple of things that occurred to me. And then the other thing you were talking about was like the next level up is in one of Michael Levin's associates, or someone that he was interested in 4 or 5 years ago. I was following her, Anna De Soto.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she's a wonderful teacher. I mean, the way she explains things is just very, very clear. And she was showing how when cells are developing, like in a human body, this is probably true in any sort of animal that has muscles.
Mm-hmm.
The cell, depending on the kind of medium in which the cell is developing in the body, it will either develop into it can develop into different kinds of cells depending on the medium. So a particular cell can either be a neuronal cell, or a muscle cell. Or
Okay.
it's probably true on all the different kinds of cells as they differentiate.
Mm-hmm.
But that the medium affects the development of the cell, because
Mm.
like neuronal cells, I think, are, well, the shape, it depends on the pressure of the viscosity of the medium in which it's developing
Yeah.
affects the shape of the cell, and the shape of
Okay.
the cell has something to do with the function of the cell. So in essence, I mean, I'm not explaining that very clearly, but the idea is that the environment or the ecology surrounding an entity acts as a level up, even if
Yeah.
like the bacteria are all independent floating around in this water or whatever, lake, pond, whatever they're
Right,
in,
right.
that has a kind of agency depending on the ecology of that water it's floating around in, because the gradient, the the gradient is different in different areas of it. So it's going to affect the way the bacteria move. So it's not really an
Yeah.
agency, but there's a, what would you call it? There's an interconnectedness in the way they function together.
Yeah, it's a higher order of constraints that it's not there, and they don't learn anything necessarily. They don't like say, let's keep in mind not to go that way again or something.
I wish we
But
could write cartoons.
yeah, really. Yeah, that's a good, that's there's sort of, you're saying there's sort of physical constraints in the medium that have an impact um, on how the individuals can behave, where they can go. That's more than just the glucose concentration. It reminds me of like stacking patterns or something where of spheres where
Mhm.
if you there's like they can only they can only stack in the bacteria can only sort of stack together at a certain density. And it could be that their flagella stop working. It's like they could potentially cram together even tighter, but then their flagella wouldn't work right.
Mhm.
So that they have like a spacing that isn't dependent on their physicality, but it's somehow they know that's not really the right word, but they know the spacing that they need to maintain without knowing what they're doing.
Mhm.
There's a physical chemical constraint on their behavior, on their spacing between that they keep between each other, for example.
Mhm. So,
Um,
so I'm curious. So we had the word encounters, and that made you start thinking about this whole thing about cells and how cells communicate with each other. So, what took you to that place from the word encounters?
yeah, so I think this is it's not the first time that I've thought about the bacteria, and it came up again to me because sort of imagining trying to make this leap where if we can take whatever we can learn by studying the layers below us that we can actually observe in some way, even though we can't understand or really observe even the sort of vast complexity of what's happening there, but we can at least make some observations about the proxies for what's happening. Um, and thinking about trying to take that anything we can learn from that and apply it to the level of agency that we perceive and can have agency in, um, perceive and respond to. And so I think that's kind of what got me thinking about it in terms of what are we encountering in is it of the layer that we're in, sort of this world, and there's a certain quality maybe to those things, and the nature of our agency is more measurable, I guess you could say. And then at what point are we encountering something like the pattern imposed on us from the transcendent or from the next layer? When I say transcendent, I
Mm-hmm.
think that automatically means all the way up, but it could even just be the next highest layer.
Mm-hmm.
For example, there might be multiple layers up there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so how do we? And I guess I don't know about a conclusion, but the sort of the first thing that pops into my mind is that, well, we can't know any more than a cell can know what the what's happening to their bioelectric field. Um, and the only way we could possibly come close to knowing is as a group, like everybody sort of like reporting honestly their own sovereign unique experience, and then somehow from that honest reporting put together some sort of collective picture of, something that's happening to all of us or many of us, that doesn't seem to be dependent on local conditions as far as we can tell. But that's kind of like the analogy of the the bacterium
Mm-hmm.
of we could probably observe, well, like why is everybody doing this all of a sudden at the same time? And there's obviously some sort of a group signal that's happening. And maybe just sort of like that's the best we can do is noticing that type of phenomenon. But I don't know that we could ever, because we can't perceive it, and there isn't like a clear um causal cause and effect relationship across that boundary necessarily. And I'll just say this one more thing, that like what one thing that Levin talks about doing is making changes to the aspects of the cellular interface that pertain to the bioelectric field state. And then, so if we do that, make this change to affect how electricity is or uh, chemical gradients are affected, across these gap junctions, etc., then that changes the bioelectric field because it changes the way electricity can be shared or is being shared between the cells. And that um so he's changing the cellular, those aspects of the cell that pertain to the bioelectric field that allow them to share this
Mm-hmm.
electrical current. And he doesn't know, and this is the interesting thing, it's like there appear to be like this morphologies that can exist, and maybe there's like the Platonic space idea that there's a set of all possible configurations that cells can configure into some sort of morphology space, um, that there needs to be experimentation to try to learn, like if we do this, then what morphologies fall out of that. There isn't like, as far as I know, there isn't like a theory or a way you could predict what, like if you make these changes to the bioelectric field, then you're going to get, until you actually see it happening, and then you can map that. If we do
Mm-hmm.
this, then this happens morphologically. And then they're just, it's an exploration space, but there is, as far as I know, there isn't like um, a, a theory that would adequately predict. Therefore, if we make this change, then this morphology would come to be, express
Mm-hmm.
itself.
That's where he's headed, though.
Right,
That's his
right.
goal.
That's the
His
goal.
goal is
Yeah.
to come up with a system or a pattern or ability to predict this particular signal is going to produce that particular form. I mean, he's even showed pictures of what he's hoping for in the future. But so far that hasn't come in. As you were talking, I had a sudden picture. George and I were watching this really stupid movie last night
Yeah.
called The War Machine.
Okay. I haven't seen it.
In some ways, it's an interesting movie because it's about this soldier, a warrior who has gone through some trauma, and then he's put in another situation where this really violent alien war machine falls out of the sky and starts killing like it's a killing machine everywhere. But before the killing machine shows up, he looks out across the forest and a whole bunch of birds take off. And in movies, that's often a signal, you know, maybe it's in
Yeah.
Bambi. Bambi realizes, oh, something is coming into my environment that's going to be harmful because the birds take off. Or, in movies, sometimes when a fire is going to move through a forest, first happens, the birds take off. The birds are sort of like the signal a disruption is about to occur. Somehow,
Yeah.
certain species seem to have really good signal system to know when a problem is about to take place. And then we can all observe these signals from other species and others that are sharing our environment. We can see these signals happening. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of this picture of we're about to encounter something, and there's a disruption about to happen, and there are some entities that have a better, my mother used to call it apperception mass, a better
Wow.
apperception mass for like getting the
Yeah.
signal at that moment.
Yeah.
Um, so then what really matters, if I'm thinking about this in terms of the cells and extrapolating up to my own level, what really matters is the posture that I
Mm.
take in the encounter, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The signal is there, something is about to disrupt. What is my posture going to be at that moment?
Can you say
Okay.
more about what you mean by
Yeah,
posture?
I'm going to say more about what I mean by that.
Okay.
Um, but in order to do that, I have to jump ship from the cell thing and think about another aspect of encounter.
Okay.
When I first started thinking about encounter, of course, the easiest thing to go do is go to the dictionary and see what's the definition of encounter. And most of the definitions are like negative, like you're going to encounter something negative. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not really, I mean, if you analyze the way it's been used in sentences in the past, it's not necessarily a negative thing, but it is a disruptive thing. It's something you're encountering, something means that you're coming upon something unexpected or a surprise of some kind. It's a kind of a disruption.
Mm-hmm.
So so that made me think about so many things. But if I go back and I look at, say, scripture, there are things in the scripture where individuals had encounters, and um, their posture at the encounter was all important. Now, before I go back to the thing about scripture, if we think about quantum mechanics and how, I think it's the Copenhagen interpretation, talks about the observation actually having a physical effect of collapsing the wave into a particle or collapsing the probability field into an actual um, measurable state. Then the type of measurement, the quality of the measurement has an impact on the outcome, on whether or not you can get a clear measurable state. So the measurement process is, in my mind, kind of analogous to attention. The kind of attention that we pay to something, and
Mm-hmm.
both Vervaeke and McGilchrist are really strong on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of attention that we pay to something basically determines what we see, um, because not that the thing itself is not there or is not what it is,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm going to see a different angle of it or a different perspective of it. I'm either
Mm-hmm.
going to see the bottom or the top or the side, or I'm going to see it in the light or in the dark or during the day or at the night, or I'm going to see it in my frustration, or I'm going to see it in my joy and happiness and enthusiasm. Whatever I bring to the situation is going to
Mm-hmm.
affect what I actually see. We realize this when we think about personal interactions with people. we can have an interaction with somebody and we can walk away thinking, wow, that was so great. I really enjoyed talking to them. And the other person walks away thinking, what a jerk. Because maybe they were in a bad state. Maybe they have indigestion from a bad breakfast and it's a really hot day. And so they're
Yeah.
just irritated by everything I said. But I walk away. I woke up this morning. I had a good walk. I'm feeling great. I have an interaction with somebody and I think, or maybe I was being a jerk, but I'm so proud of myself that I walk away think, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so all of those things affect the kind of interaction. Now, um, now I'm going to go really far afield.
Okay.
This morning I was watching Jacob Barandes, who is a physicist, I believe. He's been on Kurt Jai Mungel's Theory of Everything show
Okay.
several times, but I was particularly watching him on one of these IAI brief interviews. It was just like a 15-minute interview.
Mm-hmm.
And he brought up a theory that he has, a new way of looking at quantum mechanics, and he calls it the theory of indivisible quantum mechanics. So I decided to have a little conversation with Grok. I know some people are going to get upset that I even use the word conversation when in reference to an AI system. But anyway, I decided to use the tool Grok to
Okay. Yeah.
teach me some things about Jacob Barandes's theory of indivisible quantum mechanics.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many aspects to the theory, but one aspect to the theory is that Barandes says it's non-Markovian. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought, wow, what does non-Markovian mean? Because
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
I've talked before, I've learned before about Markov blankets, but I never really learned about Markovian systems and non-Markovian systems. So
Okay.
Grok explained it to me that a typical Markovian version of quantum mechanics states that you don't need to know the entire past history of the system in order to predict or in order to observe, to measure something about the system.
Okay.
But non Markovian means that you do need to know the entire past history of the system.
Okay.
Okay. So Barandes's theory says that the future state is dependent on the entire past history of the
Mm-hmm.
system, not just the present moment. So that got me thinking that, okay, if I move all the way up these levels, all the way up past the quantum to the atomic to the molecular to the chemical to the
Yeah.
cell, all the way up to me. I got past all my organs and everything and my muscle tissue and my neurons, and now I'm me. I'm a whole system.
Right.
That my history affects every encounter that I have. And my history isn't just where I was born and what kind of decisions I've made up to this point, but
Mm-hmm.
it's everything that I've ever encountered, every encounter I've ever had, whether it's with a book or a
Yeah.
piece of music or another person or a bad illness or an injury or indigestion.
Yeah.
Every encounter I've ever had up to this present
Yeah.
moment is what I would call my experiential DNA
And
that
even
makes
even
me,
the ones you don't remember.
yes,
Yeah,
makes
or
me who
especially
I
the ones you
am,
don't remember. Yeah,
right?
consciously.
Makes me
Right.
who I
Yeah.
am now and
Yeah.
not related to, any other person on the planet. And
Right.
then also the history of my environment, which is not just the kind of weather that I'm in right now in Northern California, which is just so beautiful, but my environment being the tradition that I'm living within and the culture that I came from and the civilization that brought me to this place where I am. And then the history of my ecology, which would be the resources that are available to me and whether
Yeah.
the air is clear or not clear. I mean, all of these things.
Right.
So when you stop and think about it, my placement within this moment now is filled with all kinds of past histories, bringing me to this moment. And then which makes sense to me to think then that this moment, whatever is being encountered at this moment, is also going to extrapolate outward into all of these different aspects of my experiential DNA, my culture, and how my culture affects all those around me, just like the bacteria are affected by this traveling band phenomena.
Right, right.
So it's this perfect stochastic process, not stochastic, chiastic process, right? Everything feeds into this
Hmm.
one moment in history and then feeds back out again to affect all of the, my future light cone would be the word that Michael Levin would use.
Right.
So the encounter of every moment is just as significant, really, as any like encounter that you might think of, where you're aware of the significance. We have encounters where we're aware, wow, that was a really significant encounter and my life has changed forever. But the reality is, I think, that every moment is an encounter like that. We're just not conscious of the impact that it has.
I would buy that. Yeah. Um, and then we're filtering essentially the work of the mind is to filter out all that, all but that is relevant and mostly threatening.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so that sounds like a really good sort of a foundational layer to kind of the situation that we find ourselves in prior to, the then what of then how do we how are we going forward, let's say, or reflecting upon the past. And that, yeah, that really puts it into perspective that it's, and maybe that there's something about it that says it's way more than we can possibly comprehend, but that there's some intelligences that are involved in our sort of nested multi-scalar intelligences that are all playing their part in some way of paying attention to the relevant field, the relevant part of that complexity
Mm-hmm.
that we aren't consciously um, needing to attend to it. And I can see that, especially because there's you know, that we can see that the work that cells are doing work, or even say atoms or molecules are doing work that we don't have any control over. We're not like telling ourselves what to do. And And if you and if you kind of keep that going, scaling that up in terms of intelligences, higher order intelligences, um, uh, it's really interesting because when you get to like the idea of the all-knowing God, let's say, and then what we're really saying in essence is that there's a highest of high intelligences if we're like trying to put God into this model or something like that, which is, I don't know how how wise that is, but it's just, if we can do it, so here we are trying, and we can try to do it. But it's almost like we're saying that if you follow that logic all the way up, you're saying that the most highest layer would be the most ignorant of the complexity of what's happening. And that doesn't, and that's not what we call God. So it's like we can take this idea and we can even go to the next highest to the next highest. But it seems to be that there's some point where language, category, and whatever this model is of hierarchies of knowledge that also sort of are abstracting and therefore subtracting detail.
Mm-hmm.
That breaks down when you get
Mm-hmm.
to what what we're maybe calling the transcendent with a capital T.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. So let's try to work this through because that's a very complex thought. So um, if I think of the inside and the outside like a watch, which I think is what you're referencing there, that the inside is very, very complicated, but I don't need to know about all that complication in order to use the watch. I can use the watch from the outside by just managing the stem or turning it on or off or whatever. Um,
Yeah,
however, however, if I'm going to build a watch, I have to know all the complication that's inside of there, right? And if I'm going to repair a watch, I have to know all the complication that's inside of there.
yeah,
So as the level up, I am I am capable. I may not be at the moment using all that, but I am capable of building and repairing and maintaining the inside of the watch, even though I have this ease of
mhm,
turning it on and off from the outside, because maybe because all the effort went into preparing the watch in a certain way as to make it user friendly.
yeah,
So maybe that's not the best analogy for what's going on with all this complexity.
yeah. Well, the cell maybe is, the analogy because, what, like when Levin talks about all the complexity that's happening at the level of protein folding or, all the intricacies of the intracellular little machines and,
Mm-hmm.
everything that's going on. It's not only so complex that it's so tiny, we can't actually see it under a
Mm-hmm.
microscope in those like there's a guy that makes animations of what's happening inside of a
Mm-hmm.
cell, and he says that it's simulation because there is no such thing as a photograph or an image of what's happening because number one, it's too tiny and too small to see, even with our best, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, it's moving so fast, it's moving faster than any camera can capture it at the highest frame rate.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just invisible because it's moving so fast. And so it's what we're actually seeing is like a very much slowed down mathematical simulation depicted as graphics that looks like we're actually looking at what's happening on the inside of the cell. So there is a complexity there that not only can't we see or understand, um, or that we can't see it, we also we can't comprehend it. We couldn't make it. We don't we wouldn't have the tools and the the tiny enough instrument. It's
Mm-hmm.
just so that's like a kind of a watch or a mechanism that we didn't make that no one could make, no human could make,
Mm-hmm.
and yet there's a handle or a stem on that we can see and manipulate, and that does things
Mm-hmm.
at layer below.
Yeah, that reminds me of a story that Jordan Peterson used to always talk about how these people who think that they can remake society by going out and marching and waving signs and creating problems and everything are analogous to him maybe trying to take apart a helicopter and put it back together again.
Mhm.
We're so foolish to think that we could understand that any one of us has. I mean, there probably is somebody who would know how to take a helicopter apart and put it back together again, but very, very few individuals would ever be able
Yeah,
to do that. But we somehow think that we're so smart that we can remake society because we've got all the answers. But in reality, these things are so complex but that makes me think about another thing. You said earlier, you said, okay, so all that stuff that I said earlier about how complex every single moment is
Yeah.
brings you to the question, well, then what? If it's so complex and so impossibly
Yeah.
computationally irreducible, what are the implications of that for, like how shall we then live, right? That's the
Right.
big question that comes up then. Um, so that's John Vervaeke's whole point about relevance realization. And
Yeah.
there's this one quote that he made on X that I thought was worth capturing. He says, "We often think we can imagine everything, but there is a hidden structure that shapes which possibilities we actually consider." Now, I think that goes beyond just relevance realization when he says
Hmm.
it's not just that my capacity to choose what is relevant guides me, but
Hmm.
there actually is a hidden structure that shapes which possibilities we actually consider. And that hidden structure, like at the level of what Michael Levin is talking about, is this Platonic structure of morphogenesis, whatever, right? That would
Yeah.
be a type of hidden structure. But
Hmm.
there is also, because we live in a universe of physical laws that are consistent, there
Hmm.
is also some sort of constraint based on those physical laws that is a kind of a hidden structure, because I'm sure there are physical laws we haven't discovered yet. There's a kind of a
Hmm.
physical structure that constrains what is possible and what we can actually consider as being possible.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but there's sometimes when I'm about to say something and then something will start, like tumblers or start falling into place in my brain, and I realize, wait, I'm about to say something that isn't actually possible, or isn't, it's like there's something in me that tells me, that's not quite the right thing to say. Maybe we'll get into this when we talk about
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
how language works.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
But before we get off on this, I wanted to go back to when you asked me about the posture thing.
Yeah.
What do I really mean by posture? And so I was thinking about different people in the scriptures who had a given posture when they had an encounter with God. And I agree. When we use the word transcendent, we're not talking about God. We're talking about whatever is outside of our capacity at the moment, right? Something that's above us, a level up. Um,
Yeah.
at least that's when Jordan Peterson was talking about the transcendent. He wasn't talking about God. He was talking about whatever's
Yeah.
outside of our known.
Yeah. It's a more mundane, transcendent type of
Yeah,
unknown realm or something. The
right.
just beyond, just over the horizon of what our senses can, and our models and our logic
Yeah.
can
And
see.
and when we're talking about God, we're not talking about the most intelligent being, because God is God is being. God is outside of our universe and beyond and above. And what would our posture be towards that level of transcendence, right? And so I was thinking, Jacob wrestles with God, and at the end he says, "I won't surrender until you bless me." But then he's blessed, and then he surrenders, and then he's blessed, or he's blessed and then he surrenders. It's not quite clear which, but the blessing and the surrender are somehow cohabiting the same space. And Isaiah has this vision of God filling the temple, and Isaiah says, "Here am I, Lord, send me." His posture is a posture of willingness and obedience. But I especially thought about Job, who has this horrendous situation happen, and then he spends all this time with these friends who are talking with him, and he's trying to figure out why this is happening to him, and he's trying to figure out maybe who God is in this whole situation. And at the end, he has an encounter with God where he actually hears God speaking to him, and God describes. God says, "Look, here's the universe that I created. All of this. You know, were you there? Do you know what this is? Do you know all the parts of it? Can you even describe it? And he goes on and on and on for 3 chapters, and so Job is like quite speechless. But at the end, what Job says is, I am insignificant. What can I say in response to you? And and then Job also says, now I know that you can do all things, and no plan is impossible for you. Therefore, I have declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I do not know. Please listen, and I will speak. I will ask you, and you instruct me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eye sees you. Therefore, I retract and I repent, sitting on dust and ashes. And what God says then is, these 3 friends of yours who've been blah, 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 blabbing about who I am, they were all wrong. You have said what is trustworthy about me. And what did he say that was trustworthy? God, you are too far above me to comprehend, right? All I can do is retract and repent and listen and be obedient. And to me, that's kind of the posture if we go into an encounter with the posture that we are going to learn, we're going to listen and learn what we can from that encounter, then we grow. If we go into it with a posture of, I'm going to conquer in this situation, we might run into the transcendent in a way that we're not going to want to run into the transcendent.
Right. Yeah, we might have an encounter with reality that we don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see what you mean by posture now. I have a better idea of what your meaning is, and there's like an ultimate posture, or you could say the deepest existential posture that we can intelligently take towards the deepest existential reality, and that's something like complete and total surrender and a pure like openness to receive, a willingness to receive from the force that is pure giving. And to me, that I mean, then to try to detail that or say how that might unfold or look is, how can you even talk about that? It's computationally irreducible.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, so I don't think it's necessarily passive, though. Do you remember that conversation you and I had years ago where we were talking about the Jordan Peterson uses this idea that there's a little glimmer out in front of you that's calling you forward, that guides your path, that you and I might talk about it as the algorithm on YouTube, right?
Yeah,
certain things
possible.
pop up on YouTube that sort of keep us moving in a certain direction, and we keep seeing things, and these threads kind of weave together. And of course, you have to protect yourself from going down rabbit holes and getting wound up in conspiracy theories and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, that thread is drawing you.
Yeah.
And when Peterson talks about, there's a couple of psychologists whose names escape me right now, but they're phenomenologists, and they talk about the finesse thigh, or the thing that's shining, the thing that's drawing your attention.
Mm-hmm.
That's analogous to Vervaeke's relevance realization, but you don't just absorb that and sit back and say, oh, well, now I know everything. You have to follow the thing. It's like we were talking last time with portals. You have to act in order to learn what that thing is teaching you as it's moving forward. um, Jacob had to continue in the struggle in order to learn what
Mm-hmm.
was to be learned from that situation. Job had to continue in the struggle, keep moving forward in the process of dealing with his suffering and everything, rather than just letting everything, like what I would call car wash mode, when you hook your car into the car wash and it just kind of pulls you through the wash machine, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Rather
Yeah,
than just passively laying back and letting it
right.
happen, we have to be actively engaged in the process.
Yeah, right. It's a participation with, um, there's something about gradients and the sort of the path of least resistance or the shortest distance and that type of thing, gradient descent and all that, where you have, even just like in a physical sense, a sled going down a hill, and it's going to want to take the fastest path down it can, that it has access to,
Mm.
not because the sled has I mean, if you just pushed it down with nobody on it, it would take its path. It would take the sort of the natural path down the hill, and it wouldn't always go in a straight line. It might meander and go around, but it would be determined by the interaction between its physical properties and the properties of the snow or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and the slope and the changes in the slope and so forth. But when you put a human being on top of that sled, and then you say, okay, well, what's my goal to go down the hill? Is it, and maybe this is kind of like where the posture comes in. Is the point to get down to the bottom of the hill so that I can win the race, or so that I can look good, or so that I can win the gold medal, or break my own personal best record, or whatever that goal is.
Mm-hmm.
Or is there a goal that you can't actually know, but there's something that you know it, but you can't even articulate what it is, because it's being given to you as a uh, sort of nonverbal knowing, an apprehension of it as opposed to a
Mm-hmm.
comprehension of it.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of like allow yourself to listen to that and to take a certain posture. It's almost like parkour or something like that, where you're
Mm-hmm.
encountering this thing, the next thing, then the next thing. But when you try to like plan out your route ahead of time, you're already assuming a position of knowing, powerful knowing over, over your path.
Oh, that's a great illustration. Parkour is a great illustration. Yeah. Because with parkour, you just kind of have to deal with every obstacle that comes up in the moment, right?
Yeah.
You can't predict necessarily. You probably could. I mean, maybe they do predictively set out a path for themselves, but then things occur in between that maybe they hadn't anticipated, and they have to deal with that in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like even skiing, it's like they make a plan, like when they're doing helicopter skiing and they get dropped off at the top and everything,
Mm-hmm.
they don't just go up there without knowing anything about the mountain. They know, they sort of, yeah, I think I'll probably go down this little ridge here, and then I need to jump over to that ridge, and plan it out ahead of time. But that's but you can't see the detail from way up in a helicopter, sort of or looking at a map or something. You can
Mhm.
only know that until the first person does it, and it's that sort of like being as a child and through the eyes of the or beginner's mind or something like that, when where you're encountering as if for the first time, because we are.
Mhm.
Like if your idea about all this history coming to a point and then expanding out again
Mhm.
is true, is right, then that's pretty much where we're at. And
When you said encountering for the first time, that made me think about Rupert Sheldrake's morphic resonance. You familiar with that theory?
I've I've heard that a little bit.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
too familiar, but
Um, he believes that there is a kind of a morphic resonance that's a world memory of sorts. One of the examples that he uses is that the first time a substance the first time a mixture crystallizes, that makes it the next time it will crystallize faster than it did the first time. And
yeah,
and this can actually be tested on opposite sides of the planet, even that
yeah,
this or maybe he just says it should be tested on opposite sides of the planet. I'm not sure. I mean,
yeah,
I don't want to
yeah,
misstate, but the idea is that there's sort of a memory that gets built into things in our universe that makes it easier for it to happen the next time, the next time, the next time. Now,
yeah,
I certainly think that's true at the level of sin, that when I sin or when I purposely err because I want a certain when I purposely fall into error because of something that I want that is not really good for me, the next time that opportunity arises, it's going to be easier for me to say yes to it, and then the next time it's going to be even easier, and then pretty soon I don't even know, it's not even a struggle anymore. I've just fallen over into that category and I'm going to
mm,
stay there
hmm,
until there's some major disruption.
yeah,
But what if that truth is also true at the level of particles and chemical reactions and molecules and all? Maybe there is some sort of a memory built into the universe so that once things form up, then that form becomes a more common form until another threshold is reached or something like that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we could always try to make the move of reducing things into, a free energy principle or a conservation principle or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like once a chemical reaction has a pathway to form a crystal, then there is some sort of a energy expenditure that was put into searching all the different ways that atoms could possibly fit together and react over time, that no longer has to be solved anymore because it's been solved once. And so therefore that energy is taken away from that search space and put into another search space. And so that now that reaction is going to happen. The universe has figured it out, so to speak, which is a really wild idea. And I'm not sure. I've heard Childrick talk about that, the crystallized, the crystal is maybe like in pharmaceuticals or something, that those are little crystals they're trying to make,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason they're trying to make them is because they're trying to make drugs,
Right. Yeah.
pharmaceuticals, and to synthesize these. And so, yeah, once this lab did it, then all of a sudden this other lab across on the other side of the world did it too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I've heard that, and I'm like, if that's like, why isn't there mainstream science trying to figure this out, you know. And I don't know enough to know. I know Sheldrake has a lot of critics, and
Hmm.
um, you know, they call him woo woo and all that kind of stuff. And I'm skeptical, I guess, but at the same time,
Yeah, well, I have no idea if what he's saying is true, but what's
yeah.
interesting to me is since I first encountered his stuff about 6 or 7 years ago, and
Hmm.
over those 6 or 7 years, more and more and more mainstream people are talking to him, which is
Right.
kind of peculiar, which means that they must be seeing something in some of his ideas. And when I listen to the conversations that he has with Mark Vernon, they have a wonderful dialogue that they do once a week, I think, um, talking about physics and
Mm.
metaphysics at the same time. Um, he seems like a very sensible person, and a lot of his thoughts have come out of practical experiments that he's done, way back when he was younger, when he was working with plants and animals. He was a biologist, botanist, or something early in his early days, and
Mm.
a very ob- observant person. Kind of
Yeah.
reminds me, looking back at like some of Goethe's work, on the idea that observation is very, very important to really, I guess, be the whole difference between, and I'm not very up on this stuff, but the difference between empiricism, which I think is like observational science, right? And then the kind of thing that they do nowadays, where they sort of try to imaginatively, like with a lot of evolutionary biology, is not observational because you can't observe it. If it happened so far back in our past, we can't observe it. But they imaginatively make scenarios for how this or that might have evolved. But
Right.
that's a far cry from empirical science, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. It is.
And a
But
lot of what Sheldrake has proposed, he has proposed based on things that he has observed, experiments that he's run and things that he has observed. He did one particularly kind of crazy experiment where he had this thought that maybe minds are not confined to the brain, and that owners actually have some kind of a mental relationship with their dogs' brains. And so, is there a way in which a dog would know when its owner is coming back? And is there a way to test that? And so the owner goes away many miles away, so the dog can't smell anymore, right? And the dog is at home. And will the dog go to the door and wait for the owner at the point that the owner decides to come home and starts
yeah.
back from wherever they are? And he's run this experiment, and it's like 80% or something. 80% of the time, the dog will go to the
Yeah.
door long before the owner is home. But just at the point that the owner decides to come home, the dog starts waiting at the door.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've experienced that with our dog. It's and you know, trying to test that. Like I would know our daughter would be 5 minutes away, and I would start watching the dog to see at exactly what moment he would start looking for her out the window and getting excited.
Mm-hmm.
And is it when she pulls in the driveway, or is it before that? And it's like it's before that, like well before that.
Mm-hmm.
And I've even done it to where like he wasn't picking up on um say our anticipation or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Or if he was picking it up through the walls, let's say. So how
Mm-hmm.
does that work?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same type of, if you want to say that, then you're still saying, yeah, okay, there's something here that we don't
Mm-hmm.
understand that connects us.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's the earthquake thing too, when animals um, know about the earthquakes ahead of time
Uh-huh.
and run for the hills. Which you could explain a little bit more, whether some sort of micro vibrations or electromagnetic fluctuations,
Uh-huh.
by the physical thing, but it's harder to explain if it's a thought or you know, just a person driving down the road. It's
Yeah.
not creating
Yeah.
any earthquake waves.
Well, I mean, we have a dog, and I didn't really want to get the dog, but our daughter wanted a dog, and so we got a dog. And she had done a lot of research about how to train dogs and how to be with a dog, and mostly based on Cesar Millan's work about um, what it takes to really be a good dog owner. And one of the things she talks about all the time is calm energy, that
Mhm.
your calm energy is going to make a huge difference with the dog. So our particular dog is not super reactive, but when we're on a walk with her, um, if another dog has some combative energy coming down the other side of the road, she's going to react and she's going to want to jump. And especially as I'm getting older, I can't handle it when she jumps and pulls on the rope, and I'm not going to be stable. So I have to be very careful that when I'm walking with her, if I see another dog coming, I don't let that affect my energy level. I
Mm,
maintain a calm energy. And as long as I am maintaining a calm energy with the leash, not putting any stress on the leash at all, just continuing to walk, she and
mhm.
I will walk right by that other dog, no matter what kind of energy that other dog puts off.
Oh yeah,
She's attached to my calm energy.
she's
But if
attached.
when
Yeah.
that dog is coming down the road, if I look at that dog and I think, oh no, this is going to be one of those times,
Mm,
she's going to just react, right? So
right,
there
right.
is some way in which our energy
Yeah, yeah.
conveys something to that dog.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And that hasn't really been studied. I mean, you hear it's pheromones. You hear that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think another thing that Levin's work is kind of opening up the door to is, okay, yeah, theorize all you want, but when there's actually a practical application that could affect people's lives in a very material way, like their health,
Mm-hmm.
um, or it could be, monetized, then people start to get interested then, and it opens the door to reconsider perhaps some of these fringe theories or what people consider to be fringe theories. Um, so I don't know. Maybe we'll see sort of a blooming or a blossoming of research into fringe theories that show promise.
Mm-hmm.
That would be okay. That would be.
Well, maybe to wrap up, I want to go back to this whole thing about posture, thinking about the dog now. um, the dog is reacting to the owner's calm energy, and that
Yeah.
keeps the dog's energy steady and stable.
Mhm.
Um, Now, maybe most people don't want to think of themselves like a dog on a leash.
No, but I know where you're going.
You do.
I think I do. Yeah.
Well, before I get there, let me just say one other thing about dogs. I've talked about this before, but not everybody doesn't watch every episode. Our dog knows that when I'm cutting up vegetables, I'm going to have some leftovers, and that the dog has access to the leftovers.
Yeah.
Um, I used to feed them to her right off the counter as I was chopping. I would just throw them in her direction because I liked watching her jump for them. You know,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
amazing to me that a dog can analyze the trajectory of the object and get there at just the right moment to grab it before it hits the ground, right? So I
Yeah.
used to throw the thing at her just for fun, like
Uh-huh.
the carrot. the end of a carrot or a carrot peel or
Uh-huh.
a piece of zucchini or something like that. And so when I first start recently, I don't, I take it all over to her dish later and put it in the dish because I don't want her jumping up at my hand and grabbing my hand with her teeth to
Yeah.
get this thing out of my hand, right? So I scoop it all up at the end, and but still, she comes over and waits right by me the whole time I'm cooking because she knows something good is coming,
Sure.
and it makes me think about that verse where Jesus is talking to the Syrophoenician woman, and she's asking for healing for her daughter, and Jesus says this really what seems like really terrible thing. Um, Something about not throwing food to the dogs. And like, is he calling her a dog? You know?
Yeah.
But she comes back with, well, even the dogs eat the scraps under the table. And that verse came into my mind, and I'm thinking, it's Junebug is our dog's name. It's Junebug's posture that's important here because she's sitting, waiting with anticipation and hope
Yeah.
and joy because she knows what's coming, because she's confident, first of all, in my capacity to meet her needs, but also my willingness to meet her needs and the abundance that I have available for her. She's
Yeah.
willing to wait patiently, right?
Yeah.
In the same way that when we're walking and she's on the leash, um, because my calm energy conveys to her everything is okay. There's nothing to worry about here. You
Hmm.
don't need to be anxious, right? I'm in control. I've got this. It's okay. So
Yeah.
sometimes I pray and I say, Lord, give me the kind of obedience and willingness that a dog has, not because not like being subservient,
Yeah.
but because of being well cared for, like a sheep, like like
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I know I'm well cared for. I know I'm nurtured. I know I don't need to be anxious. And then that affects my, if I can have that posture, that also affects my health, my mental acuity, my mental
Yeah.
um, health, and my future. Everything is affected by that posture, right?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, I really do. You're making the dog's life better by being a dog yourself. By
That's an interesting take.
dogs all the way down, like turtles all the way down. Yeah, I really like that. There's a whatever agency we have in terms of our posture, and posture is important in our that
Mhm.
because we do have agency over our posture. Um, or when we do when there's times at least that we do have the ability to if we can catch that, or take that sacred pause
Mhm.
and, and adjust our posture intentionally, then that can have effects that trickle down to ourselves, to people in our lives, our animals.
Mhm. Well,
I like it.
isn't it the Stoics that say that we don't we don't have control over anybody else, but we have control over our own reaction to a situation. We can't necessarily control the situation, but we can control our
Uh-huh.
own reaction to the situation. Um, but I think that's only part of the answer. The Stoics have part of the answer,
Mhm.
but the other part of the answer is this whole thing about, yeah, the posture, but then why do you have that posture? It's because you have faith in the in the giver of all things.
Yeah.
The yeah.
The goodness, the goodness of the giver.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Not dependent on the gift, but on
Yeah.
dependent on the goodness of the giver. Yeah,
Right, right. Well, yeah. Well, certainly Job is the story that would point to it's not about the gift.
yeah, yeah. Well, so we're going to hit language next time. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
me
this has
too.
been super fun talking today. We got to go down a lot of paths I hadn't
Yeah, we did.
expected. We never did get to biosemiotics, but maybe we'll get to that when we talk about language.
Yeah, that sounds,
Yeah.
I look forward to it. Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you,
Okay.
Alex. Have a great day.
Thanks, Karen. Bye.
Bye bye.